day. My name is Takita Wallace, and I am a survivor of domestic violence.
My name is Helen Pendarvis, and I am a survivor of domestic violence.
Hi, my name is LaShawna Harrison, and I am not just a survivor of domestic violence, but I'm an overcomer of domestic violence.
My name is Taurus Speech, and I am a victim, survivor of domestic violence.
We have a stereotype of who domestic violence victims are. I want to tell you that they're not the typical, what people typically think about it.
As a child, I grew up with domestic violence inside my home.
Growing up, I was a child, as well as my two older siblings who witnessed domestic violence in our home.
I was an AV honor roll student. I took tap dance, I took ballet, modern dance. I played the French horn and a little bit of the piano. I took track in school and baseball. I was loved and adored by everyone.
I was a 19-year-old college student who drove a school bus in the morning and worked in the afternoon, went to school in between.
I was educated. I had a college degree. I was actually a professional at the time, and I had a great family. Came from parents that when my father died, they had been married almost 60 years. I had never been around domestic violence until I became a victim of it.
I was very young, probably shouldn't have been dating, about 16 years old, and he was about 18 or 19 years old. For the first 2 years, there was no type of violence in the relationship at all.
I have personally never had anyone to raise their hand to me.
One morning when I got off my bus at the high school, I heard a melodious, booming voice say, "You look very nice today." I looked around, and it turned out to be the person that I would marry.
I remember growing up in a household where what went on in our house stayed in our house. And I remember a time where my father would come home, or a time he came home and he told my siblings and I, as well as my mom, that one day he was going to take my mom's life and turn himself in.
And I guess as a teenager, I dated, and domestic violence was considered love tax to me. So kind of, sort of, I was programmed to accept domestic violence. So when I got into my relationship, I became a victim of domestic violence.
I was married 9 years, lived together 7, was separated for 2. During that time, it was red flags before, but I kind of ignored them or made excuses. That's what I did. I made excuses for them.
He was a Jamaican. He was very tall. He was very powerful. He had a different voice. He just moved me with all these beautiful things about Jamaica. And he was the lovingest man in the world, always with flowers, always respectful to my parents.
My first real physical battle with domestic violence was about 5 months before I was married. He literally almost choked the life out of me. And then it was like, what happened? But then at that time we were going through some things, stressing about a wedding, all of that, so I made excuses.
90 days after we got married, he decided he didn't like the way I spoke to his friend that he was drinking with under the tree. He came into the house, his plate was on the table, he threw the plate at me. I said, "I don't have to take this from you."
I was maybe 6 years old at the time, didn't really understand what that meant, and because of the fear that he had instilled in us, being very abusive verbally, physically, I was too fearful to even say anything to the school counselors, to whatever help may have been around, whether it be family, friends. It was just not an option. And sure enough,
I got pregnant with my first child, and I became a possession. And once I became a possession, it was whatever he say do, whenever he says does it.
So it was only a week after me being married that an incident happened, and it seemed minor to most people and even to me. But at that time, it was a very physical altercation between us, to the point that he was choking me and I was about to pass out. And the funny thing about it is, it was our wedding picture sitting on the side table that we knocked over.
December 20th, 1997, my biological father came home intoxicated, maybe high for whatever drug he could find. Walked in the house while my mom had just finished doing my hair, and she was there doing my sister's hair as we were preparing for a Sunday Christmas service as my mom played the piano.
He took his fist and he hit me so hard in the back that I fell between the couch and the coffee table.
I suffered 13 to almost 14 years worth of domestic violence. So that is a lot of stories that I can tell.
To get him off of me, I reached for the glass and I cut him severely. It terrified me. I even loaded him and carried him to the hospital. And that was the first time that I ever had any interaction with the police.
And as we were going out, he was coming in. And he says to me, "Where are you going?" "Oh, we're just going out to have drinks and everything. You know, I've been in the house with the kids for a long time, working. I haven't had a good time, so we're just going out for a few hours." And he says, "No, come here, let me speak to you." So I go over to the steps and he whispers in my ear, "Tell your friend to leave. You're not going anywhere."
It was 19 days after her birthday, 5 days before Christmas. My biological father called my mom upstairs, and it was a normal arguing, fussing, thumping of a night. My siblings and I heard my mom yelling and screaming for mercy.
While I was on my back, he began to kick me with his steel-toe working in my side. When I tried to get up, he punched me in the face and I fell again between the couch and the end table. He tried to kick me in my face, so I put my arm, and he continuously kicked me in my shoulder until it hung like I had no bones.
I went to walk away, and he grabbed me by the top of that hair, and he dragged me up those steps.
Because they called the police in, and we were talked to and arrested for domestic violence.
We heard lots of screaming, lots of rumbling, and then it all just came to a stop. My father came downstairs and looked at my siblings and I and told us, "You guys know what time it is." So we went to bed, and that was that.
He was arrested, but before I left the ER the next morning, he was already at home. Because in 1991, criminal domestic violence was a misdemeanor. And the same fine that you pay now for a first DUI was the fine for domestic violence, $998.
Here I am, a professional, college degree, and I'm like, how did I get myself into this? And from there, I only knew that that was the first real incident. It got worse.
I remember hearing and feeling all of my hair ripped out of my scalp. It's like 26 steps. Slowly but surely, he dragged me up those steps. By the time I got to the top of those steps, I had bald patches everywhere. If I go back and he snatched the hair, he grabbed the other hand. I'm going up the steps, holding my head. It's so painful.
The next time we woke up, our alarm clock was a flashlight coming from a police officer in my sister and I's room, asking us where the light was, told us to get up and get dressed. To get to the front door, we had to walk past our mom's room where the incident happened. And there was yellow tape, and I remember the room looking like it was in a disarray, and the cop kind of stood in front of the doorway to block our view.
He was let out on a PR bond. I left and I went to my mama, and she said, I told you not to marry him in the first place. Why are you here? So what did I do? I went back to it. He was good for another 3 months.
It became lies every day of why you have this bruise, or why you the black eyes, the busted lips.
We get to the top of the steps, and he says to me, if you want to go out that door, I'm going to throw you down these steps and throw you out the door. You can either go in the room, or you can go down those steps. I went down those steps.
We went down the stairs, and the first face I saw was my brother Brooks. My oldest brother Brooks was 19 at the time, and he took custody of me and my two older siblings. And I'm so grateful for that, because had he not, we probably would have bounced around from foster care home to home, and we did not have to do that.
In that 3 months' time, I conceived my son and did not know until the next time. He punched me in the face, and then he kicked me in the face, which caused a torn cornea in my left eye. To this day, I still have to put drops in my eye, because if not, I would have already lost my sight in my left eye.
The next morning, when I woke up, and I seen myself in the mirror, and I seen all my beautiful hair gone, I shaved it. I shaved it bald. And for over 17 years, I never let my hair grow back. It would grow back. It would get to a bush. And then I would look at my hair in the mirror, and I would shave it all off again. For 17 years, I was so scarred by what he did to me. I would never, ever let my hair grow back.
Over the years and months, I continuously left and came back. But one of the hardest things for me leaving and coming back was because I didn't have money. I didn't have any place to go but home. I was embarrassed to continue to go home.
I understand how blessed we are and how set apart our situation is, because we did have a very, very strong village and community that supported us, that looked out for us. I think about all the people that came in to really assist my brother in raising a 6-year-old, which was me, my brother who was 7, and my sister who was 9.
I look back to all of those years when I used to love my beautiful hair. I just used to love my beautiful hair, just to throw it, just to swing it, just for the kink up. And I had to say to myself, like, you deserve this. You're not even being abused anymore. Why are you still holding on to what happened to you that long ago?
One of the things that's very important to a domestic violence survivor is that they have somewhere to go that not only is safe, not only I had the counseling, but I needed more. I needed to try to find someplace to say that I was in charge of my life again.
The day I went into labor, I was at my in-law's house and he took me to the hospital. My son was delivered and he insisted I had to come back home because he would rather see me dead than his son raised outside his house. I had to make a decision. I knew my mother couldn't protect me. All of my brothers were always serving in the military, so I knew I didn't have a choice. I didn't have a job, so I knew I had to go back. I couldn't take care of my son on my own.
And help. Like I said, I grew up with my mother and my father. My father abused my mother. He had 7 girls. I still have my father in my life, and my mother and my father are friends after everything he did to my mother. But he had to realize that he needed help.
I actually have stayed in the shelter, and embarrassingly, I've actually stayed outside before, just so my family wouldn't find out what was going on. And I wanted to leave, but I wanted to be out and be able to take care of myself because it had been drilled into me for years that I couldn't take care of myself anymore, that I needed him. And I wanted to be able to do that for myself.
I remember having to go through anger management because as happy-go-lucky as I am now, it took a lot of work. It took a very strong village. I especially remember there being people in our corner assisting us on the legal side.
One is because sometimes the effects of abuse, they don't go away. Sometimes they last forever. Sometimes you have been so abused and so programmed, you just stick with what you know.
That is another reason that I support Adriene Atkinson. She understands from her professional career what a woman goes through and what is needed to transition out of that.
And even though I was in an abusive relationship, I wasn't a woman who just got beaten on. I always fought back. But fighting back doesn't stop me from getting abused.
While it's been over 20 years since my siblings and I witnessed our father murder our mom, there is not a day that goes by that I feel I need her more and more and more every day. So today and forever, I stand as a champion and an advocate for children who have lost their parent to domestic violence.
When that, I'm calling it curse, was broken over me, I found the inner strength that was always there. An inner strength. I got a piece of me back. And we all abuse women. We just all want to be us. We want to have our own lives. We want to have control and validation over who we are.
I know the importance of having a voice and a face that looks like you, that understands, that is in the community, that can champion for you and those to come before you, like or after you, like no other.
I believe in that divine intervention, and I also believe that's one of the reasons why by sheer happenstance, at the Omni Hotel in Asheville, North Carolina, I met Adriene Atkinson.
And that is exactly why Survivors for Adriene is so necessary, to have someone speak on your behalf, to implement laws that are going to change, not just bring awareness to domestic violence, because it's more than just a month of awareness.
Adriene is a champion for the underdog. I think if I had known Adriene then, she would have helped me escape or helped me beat him up or something, even then.
And I'm here as a survivor of Adriene because she understands that. She doesn't only understand that victims need healing and help. She also understands that those who victimize needs healing.
We don't always go back because that's what we want. It's because we want to be independent. We want to take care of our own families. We want to take care of ourselves.
Domestic violence, it breaks up families. It harms children. women and men. We always try our best to provide services for women of abuse, but Adrienne is taking it much farther. She's taking it where it needs to be. We need to address why these people victimize the one they love.
There is no more bringing awareness to it. As you can see, it does not matter how long ago it was, how recent it was. No one should have to go through the pain, the heartache, and the overall shifting the trajectory of their life due to someone making a decision to cause physical, emotional, or mental harm on anyone.
Since 1992, it's not a $998 fine for domestic violence, but there still is no teeth behind the legislation that we have. If there were any teeth behind the legislation, women would be killed by their domestic partners. There's no teeth behind restraining orders. There's no teeth behind orders of protection. The order doesn't actually go into effect until they harm you. With Adrienne in our state legislature, she can put some teeth behind the laws that we already have. She can see that there's funding for proper training for police officers who, when they show up and your clothes are torn and your face is swelling and you say everything's okay, that they recognize the signs and they don't take your word for it.
She's been in this a long time. She knows what to look for. She knows how to help, and that is what we're needing. Then we're needing her in the State House in order to advocate for some of this other stuff for us.
As you can see, even though it's been over 20 years, it never really gets easier. You just find a way to get through it.
We need not only to get the women and the children counseling, we need people like Adrienne that are also going to try to get these men or these abusers help.
I support Adrienne because she's not only a fighter on her job, but Adrienne has been advocating for the underdog in her community for many, many years.
So we are out to end the beast of domestic violence, period.
They need counseling and they need help just as much as the women.
Adrienne will ensure that there's teeth, that there's funding, and that those of us who hear the sign to get out, that when we get out, we can stay out because we don't have to go back because we don't have a job, because we don't have money, because we have family members who won't take us in.
You deserve better, and you deserve someone who is going to support you, who is going to advocate for you, who is going to make a change, not just in the community, but on a state level, on a federal level, and on a global level.
You cannot stop abuse by protecting the women that are abused. You have to go deeper and find out why the person is being abusive to someone and assist them with their abusive behaviors.
And she will ensure that we have all the necessary things that we need. And because I got out, I now have a 6'4", very handsome son who is a productive member of society, who has not repeated the cycle of abuse.
I support Adrienne in the House of Representatives because she doesn't just care for the victim. She cares for the whole entire family. And the way we will decrease this is by working with everyone, the children, the women, the men that abuse.
And Adriene Atkinson for House District 25 will make sure that we have more sons and more daughters who grow up to not repeat the cycle of violence.
I want to thank Adrienne for going a step above, not just to help the victims, but help those who victimize so we can put the family back together in the community.
And that is why Adrienne Atkinson for House of Representative for District 25 is the only answer.
It is my honor and privilege to welcome survivors for Adrienne. This dynamic group of women survivors have joined my campaign to tell their stories of how domestic violence has impacted their lives and how they choose a candidate who will take their issues to the State House. I am Adriene Atkinson, and I am a candidate for House of Representatives for District 25 in South Carolina. I am running because I believe that it is time for a brand new generation of servant leadership for District 25. Our district is made up of a dynamic group of people, but numbers don't lie. We have poor infrastructure, extremely high numbers of domestic violence, and just an overall morale that needs to be revived. I'm looking forward to serving you and hearing from you about what you want to see better in District 25. The People's Campaign is one in which we will put people before politics. Hello, I am Adriene Atkinson, and I am running for House of Representatives in South Carolina for District 25. We know that October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and it is my absolute pleasure to launch my initiative called Survivors for Adriene. I've been working with domestic violence victims for the past 8 years. And in that work, I'm sad to say, South Carolina has been ranked in the top 10 in our country for the past 20 plus years. Just this past year, we were ranked number 6 in the nation for women killed by men in domestic violence situations. That is simply unacceptable. We must do better. We also know that Black women experience domestic violence at a much higher and a much more deadly rate than any other population in the country. District 25 is comprised of a majority Black women population. And in South Carolina, Greenville County ranks at the top of the list for domestic violence incidents. In Greenville County, District 25 has an unusually large number of domestic violence cases. We have to do better than that. We need to provide legislation that is going to provide survivors of domestic violence an opportunity to get the resources that they need. And as well, we need to make sure that those who have had issues with domestic violence are also able to get the resources that they need to help them. During my time working with domestic violence survivors, everywhere I turned, whether it was friends, family members, friends of family members, friends of friends, there are so many women and men impacted by domestic violence. I wanted South Carolina, particularly District 25, to hear the stories of those who have been impacted by domestic violence in some way. We have to realize that domestic violence doesn't just impact those who have been hit or had violence committed towards them, but it also impacts children, families. I wanted to bring Survivors for Adriene to the forefront to ensure that those who have experienced domestic violence firsthand have not only an opportunity to tell their own personal stories, but also an opportunity to talk about the kind of candidate that they want to represent them in the South Carolina State House. I'm very proud to launch Survivors for Adriene.